All right, good morning. Okay, so as I mentioned last time, we're going to talk a little bit about paper 2 today. Right now, this may seem a little bit early to be talking about a paper that isn't due until the beginning of December, but this is a research paper, and I want you to have plenty of time to think about this, plenty of time to gather sources, and plenty of time to put this together, right? It's going to be significantly longer than the first paper. It's going to be significantly more work. So the length of this particular paper is 2,400 to 3,000 words. So roughly 8 to 10 pages here. 2,400 again is the minimum, and your works cited page does not count towards that total, right? So 2,400 words at least without the works cited page. So you're going to take one work, like one text that we've studied over the course of the term, and you are going to do a research argument on a particular theme or pattern that you see in that work, right? That you think is important to our understanding of it. So you're going to find some theme in the work, come up with an argument about it, do a little bit of research. You're going to need at least 5 outside sources, right? 5 secondary sources. We'll talk in a minute about what kinds of sources are appropriate for this project. And it's going to be due on Friday, the 2nd of December. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about the basic task? Yeah, Brittany.
You said we're just picking one or picking 2?
You're picking one work. You're picking one text. Yeah, Sarah.
You said your primary sources do not count towards a 5 source total. You mean this, right?
Yeah, exactly, right? Your primary source is whatever it is you're actually writing about. So that doesn't count towards your 5 source requirement, right? You need 5 sources apart from the text you're writing about, right? That's what I mean here by outside. Now, one thing I do want to let everybody know is that you don't actually have to use, like say you're writing a paper on Faust, you don't have to use sources that are just about Faust, right? You can use sources that are about German Romanticism. You can use sources that are about German history, right? You can use all sorts of other things to provide a sort of context or literary background for what you're writing on. Yeah, Brittany?
The things that you provided for us on Word, can we use those as a resource for everything?
Some of them. So ask me first whether or not this is appropriate. Basically, like with any source that you're thinking about using, if you have any qualms about whether or not the source is or is not appropriate, just come and ask me. Shoot me an email. It's like, hey, Dr. Moyer, I was thinking of using this particular source. Is this appropriate? And I will say yay or nay. Yeah, Sarah.
When you say like German history, German Romanticism, can you use as context for Faust? What do you mean as context? What do you mean as context?
Well, setting it in its sort of proper historical period, right? Setting it within the context of a particular literary movement. Right, so Faust isn't like this particular text, no text operates in a vacuum, right? It's not just like it's sealed off in a Ziploc bag from the world around it. The authors who write texts, the texts themselves, are shaped by broader intellectual movements. They're shaped by events in the world, right? So you can be looking at those sorts of things as well as specific criticism of the works involved. Right? You can also look at things from just sort of outside the discipline of English altogether if they're relevant, right? If you want to do a psychoanalytic reading of a particular text, you can certainly use things from psychology, right? If you want to look at a particular character as a leader, it might be okay to use certain things like, say, from management theory, right? You can use things from outside the discipline of English. People do this all the time, right? Like my own work is mostly on literary spaces, so I look a lot at work in geography and architecture, as well as literary criticism, right? That sort of thing is absolutely okay. Now, what's not okay right? I'm going to just skip briefly here down to the kinds of sources I don't want you using for this. Right, so if you look down here to working with secondary sources, right, so you can use scholarly books or journals in any discipline. We'll talk a little bit more about how to find those for those of you who may not have done a big research project before. You can use journal articles that you find online through JSTOR, the MLA bibliography, or any of the other library databases. I do not want you simply finding things via Google searches. Right? I don't want you to just use a conventional search engine to turn up a bunch of websites. There is a reason for this. How does Google's search algorithm work? Anybody know? How do they decide which results to give you?
Popularity.
It's based on popularity, yeah. How many people visit this site? How many people link to this site, right? And that moves you to the top of the list. These sites are never actually reviewed by a human being with expertise in the subjects. Now, the fact that an idea is popular does not necessarily mean that that idea is accurate, right? If 75% of the population of the United States believed President Obama to be a cactus, would that make him a cactus? No, yeah. An idea can be popular and stupid, right? So this is why I don't want you simply finding websites via Google. I also don't want you using Wikipedia for this particular project. Why not Wikipedia? What's wrong with Wikipedia?
You can edit Wikipedia.
Yeah, you used to be able to do it much more easily than you can now. There is a much more thorough vetting process for Wikipedia articles than there used to be. I mean, it used to be you could just go in and basically type whatever you wanted and just have that appear on the site. I remember once in graduate school looking up the article on Plato on Wikipedia, and it said that Plato was an expert on monkey grief, especially the particular kind of grief that monkeys felt when their mates fell down elevator shafts. So clearly this was something that's, somebody was trying to prove some kind of point about Wikipedia, right? Hey, I can just come in here and say whatever I want, and here it is, right? And I mean, this is sort of something about the net in general, right? About the World Wide Web in general, is that any idiot with an opinion or an axe to grind can post whatever the hell they want. I hesitate to call this guy a colleague in graduate school. He was more a consistent annoyance. He used to go into Wikipedia and edit all of the entries on romantic poets, British romantic poets, simply to prove that none of them were ever gay at all. Which is, right, one, pointless, and two, untrue, right? So just keep in mind that these people are out there and they're monkeying around with the information on websites. Yeah, Ashley.
Can we use Can we use the sources that Wikipedia has?
If the article's not flagged for inaccuracies or, an unbalanced viewpoint. Yeah, that's the one thing that an encyclopedia article in general can be good for a course like this, right? There will often be a bibliography at the end, and you can use those, you can go back and try to use those sources. In general, you shouldn't be using encyclopedias, or at least general encyclopedias, at this stage in your academic career for this kind of assignment. An encyclopedia is just going to give you a general overview of a topic. Right? It's not going to get into specifics, it's not going to get into deep analysis. It's going to give you like the SparkNotes version of a particular text. And I want you to be working with things that are a little bit deeper. I don't want you using book reviews because those are purely evaluative, right? They're just, you should read this book or you shouldn't read this book. I don't want you using articles from general interest newspapers or magazines either. Right? The average American newspaper is written at a 6th grade level. We are all reading and writing above a 6th grade level, yes? And it's the same problem you get from an encyclopedia article. Right? It's not written for a scholarly audience, it's written for a generally uninformed public. I don't want you using CliffsNotes, SparkNotes, Schmoop.com, Masterplots, or any other similar sort of summary sites, right? Again, for similar reasons. What these are going to give you is just a broad overview of what happens in a text. They're not going to tell you very much that's all that specific. There's no real analysis there. Don't use works of popular fiction, self-help, or pop psychology as secondary sources. Right? This isn't therapy. And finally, while I do respect everyone's particular religious viewpoints, if you are using the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, or some other religious text that is personally very meaningful for you as a secondary source, then you are probably trying to make an argument from personal belief rather than from objective analysis of the text, right? So this is why I ban those as well as secondary sources, right? I just want you to give me an analysis of the text, not how it fits into your particular religious or psychological worldview. Does anybody have any questions about this? Now, I do, I've noticed actually that I posted them at the beginning of the semester and then George, you updated and it seemed to have erased them. I had posted a bunch of bibliographies that essentially gave you lists of the sources that I consulted when I was setting up the course. George of you seems to have erased all of those. So I am going to re-upload them so that those will be available for you. I know for a fact that almost all of the sources listed on those bibliographies are available, if not in our library, then at least through the University System Consortium, right? So you can get everything that's on those lists. They're all available. How many of you have had to do a research project like this for an English course before? Okay, it's basically, okay, those of you who took Comp 2 with me and a couple others. All right. So let's talk a little bit then briefly about how to use the library here at GSW to find the sources. All right, so let's, there we go. Okay, so to locate sources in the first place, right, your first stop in general is going to be Galileo, right? And this is just a set of databases that the entire University System of Georgia subscribes to. There is a password for Galileo to use it off campus. I can't remember off the top of my head what it is, but if you don't know it, feel free to email me and I'll look it up and send it to you. It's tempting to just enter things into this search bar and use whatever comes up. That's not the best or smartest way to use Galileo because you will turn up way too much information. Essentially, that searches every database we subscribe to. And so you're going to get a lot of static, right? A lot of irrelevant noise coming through if you do it that way. So try browsing by subject. Go to literature, language, and literary criticism. And this will give you a list of databases. The most useful for our purposes will be JSTOR and the MLA International Bibliography. Now, JSTOR will allow you to directly access journal articles. Because we don't have very much money to spend on library things, we don't pay for full access to JSTOR. Sometimes you might turn up an article that it says you don't have access to this, you're expected to pay for it. There are ways you can get it without paying for it. I'll show you in a moment. But yeah, click on Advanced Search, and this will give you these little Boolean fields you can fill in, right? So say we want to do a paper on Faust and Gretchen and salvation. So we narrow by item type. We only want links to articles and books. We don't want pamphlets, reviews, or miscellaneous. And then we can also filter by the discipline that we want, right? So let's have this only give us language and literature results. Right, we don't want anything from zoology. And this turns up 55 articles, right? It gives you little previews here. You can download a PDF directly of the article, save it to your desktop, and then it's yours in perpetuity. You don't have to keep going back and forth to JSTOR to find it, right? Okay, so that's how JSTOR works, basically. Now, the MLA bibliography works a little bit differently and doesn't always give you direct access to the things that you want. So you'll find that in the same place as JSTOR, in Galileo. And loading, 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 come on, thank you. And we enter our search terms here, right? Faust, and Gretchen, and salvation. In general, you want to be as specific as possible with your search terms because that will further narrow the results you get, right? And if you find with really specific search terms that you're not getting any results or not getting enough results, then you try to broaden them out a little bit. All right, and let's see what this gives us. No results were found. Okay, so let's just remove the salvation part and see what we get. Okay, and this gives us 46 results, some of which are in German. Unless you are actually able to read German, we can actually limit these results by language. So let's stick with those that are in English, and that cuts us down to 27, right? Now, some of these you will be able to access directly, right? If there's a link at the bottom of the thing here that says PDF full text, you can access that directly just like you would with JSTOR. Download the PDF, save it on your desktop, it's yours. With some of these, you can't do that. So, say you're really interested in Gretchen's relationship with her mother, but oh no, I can't access this article directly. Well, you can get it by using interlibrary loan. So you can go to the drop-down menu on the home page, takes you to Iliad. If you have never used Iliad, have any of you ever used Iliad before? Okay, no. All right, so you're going to need to create an account. And it's pretty easy to do. Basically, you just give them all of this information, click on submit, boom, you've got an Iliad account. And in order to do things with that account, you will then need to access the Iliad page. So once you have an account, log in. And the home page here tells you which requests you've made that are still outstanding, that still haven't been filled. I've been waiting on some of these for a very, very, very long time. Usually Iliad is actually pretty quick. Essentially what happens when you fill out a request, right, it sends that request out to every library that subscribes to Iliad in the US. And then if somebody has the article or the book that you're looking for, they'll scan it as a PDF and they'll upload it to a site you can go to. Right? If you click on electronically received articles, that's where your list of received articles will be. Right? There'll be a little link you can click to get the PDF and download it to your desktop so it's yours in perpetuity. Now, in order to actually fill out a request, you need to determine first what sort of thing it is you're asking for. So this is Motherhood and Family of Goethe's Faust, right? It is a journal article. All right, so we pick article. Journal title is Historical Reflections. Article title, Motherhood and Family in Goethe's Faust. Usually giving them things like full name of journal and full title of article will help them get things to you faster. But for our purposes, we're just going to abbreviate things. The article's author is Robert Anker. Volume 23, issue 1, winter 1997. Yes, it's very important that you get the page numbers right. This is 29 to 48, so that they actually send you the right thing. And then you submit request, and you'll get an email when it's ready. And when it's ready, you just log into Iliad, and it'll be in your list of electronically received articles. Okay, any questions about this? One other thing that's good about Iliad is that if you just need a particular chapter of a book rather than the whole book, you can just request that chapter, and they'll send you a PDF of it. Was that a hand coming up, Brittany? Did you have a question?
Yeah. So like, about how long does it take for them to just send you one thing that you request? Like weeks at a time or just a couple of days?
Usually just a couple of days. If you're asking for something that's pretty obscure, which I don't imagine most of you would be, that can take a couple of weeks. But yeah, most of what you'd be asking for is not that weird and not that obscure, right? So it should arrive typically in a couple of days. So you do need to plan ahead a little bit. And in general, right, you need to plan ahead a little bit if you're requesting, say, books from other libraries in the consortium, because Georgia's a big state, and those will take a couple of days to get here. But yeah, you don't have to plan necessarily weeks or months ahead to get things from Iliad.
They send them to our library?
Yeah, if it's a book you're asking for, they send it to our library. If it's a PDF of an article or a chapter, they'll just upload it to the electronically received articles page. And you can just go there and download it. Bless you. Any other questions? Yes, Macy.
I don't know if you've already said this or not, but does it have to be from the second book, or can it be from like any book, anything?
It can be anything we've done in the class that was not the subject of your first paper. Yeah, so you can't write your research paper on the same thing you wrote your non-research paper about. But any other text you want to write about is fair game, is fine. Any other questions? Yes, Brittany.
Are we responsible for sending whatever book we get from the library that was sent from another library back to that library?
No.
Okay.
You bring it back to our library, and they'll send it back. Yeah. And then if it somehow gets lost in transit, as sometimes happens, our library will usually back you up. And if they won't, come talk to me, and I know the appropriate people to go and yell at. I like yelling at people, it's weirdly satisfying. All right, anything else? Yeah, go ahead, Macy.
Okay. Do we get extra credit if we go to the writing center again?
Yeah, on all writing assignments, you get extra credit if you go to the writing center. Yep. So yeah, that does still apply. Anything else? All right, then let's finish up with Faust, part 1. So, how'd this go for you? Okay. What's giving you trouble? What is causing this reaction?
Probably all the character introduction at the end there.
Okay. You mean like in the Walpurgis night scene, where just all of these characters pop up once and then disappear? Okay. Let's talk about that for a minute then and what's going on there. Does anybody know what Walpurgis night is supposed to be?
it's like a special festival for witches to all come together and stuff.
Yeah, it is supposed to be a giant witches' Sabbath. Now, Walpurgis Night is actually a Catholic holiday. It's on the liturgical calendar. It's the Feast of Saint Walpurga, and it takes place on April 30th. So it's the night before May Day, May 1st. And May Day is a sort of spring fertility festival traditionally, right? Particularly if we look at pre-Christian and then medieval cultures, right? May Day is often a time for these kinds of fertility celebrations. Have any of you ever seen like movies where there are children dancing around a maypole, right? They're holding ribbons in their hands and they're dancing around a pole and winding the ribbons around the pole?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, the pole, which seems rather innocent to us, is actually regarded by some folklorists as a traditional phallic symbol. And so, yeah, the traditional May Day celebrations are fertility celebrations, basically. But Walpurgis Night is also sometimes called, in Germany, Hexennacht, or Witches' Night. And when witchcraft hysteria was running high, in the 17th century, this was regarded as the great gathering of witches for the year. Yeah, Brittany.
Is that a U after the name?
Where?
Hexennacht. Yep. Hexennacht. Now, does Goethe seem to be using this as a scene of horror or terror here?
No. It was more like let's have fun thing.
More like a what?
Celebration, like let's have fun thing.
Yeah, it's more like a giant party with no rules, right?
Yeah.
Now, the scene takes place on top, or well, on the slopes of a mountain called the Brocken. And the Brocken is the highest mountain in central Germany. So this is sort of one thing to remember about Romanticism, right? When Romantics choose their natural scenery, what kinds of nature do they tend to choose? Do they like mild, gentle nature?
Impressive nature.
Yeah, big, dramatic nature, right? So the Brocken, choosing that as the site for this, fits in very well with that kind of attitude towards the natural world, right? We're not going to Little Gentle Hill. No, we're going to the highest mountain in this part of Germany. Great big rocky craggy face. And as they're going up the slopes, what sorts of things do they see? What sorts of things do they encounter?
Everything. Pretty much like everything you can really imagine.
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild stuff, right? There are, witches dancing naked all over the place. There are monsters. There's this group of old men standing around. Now, what Goethe is introducing here into the play is a sense of what the critic Mikhail Bakhtin calls the carnivalesque. How many of you are familiar with Carnival or with Mardi Gras? What goes on at Carnival or Mardi Gras?
Non-stop party.
Non-stop partying, right?
Don't they flash the boobs for the beads?
Yes. Yeah, like things like it's the last day before Lent, right? Which is supposed to be a season of fasting and of deprivation, and so before Lent starts, right? In a lot of predominantly Catholic countries, you have just this one last day of total all-out riots before you have to then settle into your fast. Right, so Mardi Gras, Carnival, these sorts of the basis of the concept of the carnivalesque is this kind of temporary flouting of the rules, flouting of authority. Right, the normal order of things gets overturned for a day. So Bakhtin describes this as a literary mode that subverts the dominant mode of the text through humor and chaos. Right, so you step out for a moment of the text that you're in for ironic mockery. So we will find a lot of parallels in the Walpurgis night celebration to other things that are going on throughout this work. And Goethe is really, really big on parallel images and parallel symbols. There are a lot of things here connecting various scenes throughout the play together, not just in the Walpurgis night scene. But these are the features that Bakhtin usually attributes to the carnivalesque. Right, 1, completely free interaction and association between people of different ages, different classes, different sexes, what have you, right? There's no barrier to people who are unlike each other interacting. Secondly, and we see plenty of this, eccentric behavior. In the carnivalesque mode, you don't have to be your normal, everyday, staid self. You find misalliance. Groups that would not normally work together, coming together and mingling freely. In fact, making common cause together. So the young and the old, Christians and pagans, the rich and the poor, right? Some pair of groups that are misaligned with each other, coming together to make common cause. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, sacrilege without fear of punishment. Right? For this one day, in this one mode, you are given license to offend whatever deities you want and not have to suffer any consequences for it. So in a lot of ways, this is what's going on in the Walpurgis night scene. Anything specific you guys noticed about it that fits this particular discourse, or anything that you had questions about regarding it? Anything that connects it to other scenes in the play? How consistent is the narrative of the Walpurgis night thing? Does it seem to fit into the larger narrative of the play very well?
I think it kind of does. I mean, he's trying
Okay.
to show them that, all the things he could be to
Okay.
have fun, be
Yeah.
bad.
And indeed, like, what is it that Mephistopheles is essentially promised Faust? What is it that Mephistopheles is supposed to be doing for him?
Given
Yeah.
Knowledge that he's searching for.
And what kind of knowledge is he searching for? Is he searching for book learning anymore? Is he searching for book knowledge? No.
The meaning of his existence. That kind of stuff you really can't answer.
And if you're a romantic, you find the meaning of your existence through what? That's part of it, right? But it's not the whole thing. What's pardon, Lindsay?
Your emotions and
Yep, indulging your emotions, exploring, yeah, experience. Yeah, the world for a romantic is not a thing to be studied, but a reality to be experienced. And this is what Mephistopheles is giving to Faust, right? This is their deal. Mephistopheles has taken Faust out of the study and brought him out into the world, right? He's artificially given him youth in that witch's kitchen. And now Faust is getting to explore and experience all of the things that he hadn't experienced because he was locked up in his study all the time. One of them being, right, love and sexual pleasure, right? So yeah, so this is the basic function that Mephistopheles serves in the play. Spokesman for the value of experience, worldly experience. Now, it might also help if we relate this to popular representations of the devil in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. How many of you have ever read Paradise Lost by John Milton? Or are familiar at all with it? Okay, you have read it. Okay, so how is Satan portrayed in Paradise Lost?
If I remember correctly, he's kind of this youthful, at least at first, he's this youthful, kind of bratty teenager.
Okay, could be described as bratty teenager, right? But he's also far and away the most interesting character. And to some extent, he and his rebel angels are given a legitimate gripe, right? That God has chosen to elevate the sun over them and to elevate this new being he's created in this little garden over the angels who have been serving him for however long, right? So Satan in Milton's work is this kind of brooding anti-hero. We spend more time with him in that poem than with any of the other characters. And this shapes not only Romantic era perceptions of the devil as a kind of spirit of rebellion, but also shapes the way the romantic hero is himself written. Right? The romantic hero is really kind of modeled on Milton's Satan. Another thing to throw into the mix here is that, by and large, the phenomenon of reading the Bible literally is fairly modern. It's something that arises really primarily in England and the United States in the middle of the 19th century. People didn't really read the Bible literally before then, or at least not to the same extent. So, by and large, educated people did not believe in the existence of an actual devil. So it was, perfectly fine and spiritually safe for them to transform this figure from, the tempter of mankind into a kind of spirit of positive rebellion against unjust authority. Yes?
What do you mean exactly by they didn't really believe there was like a devil?
I mean exactly that they didn't believe in the devil as an actual being. Who was actively running around tempting people into sin, right? And in fact, even the evidence in the Bible itself for the devil isn't mentioned all that much, particularly in the Old Testament, right? Judaism actually does not have a devil. The Satan character in the book of Job is Satan in Hebrew merely means the adversary, and he's more of a kind of divine prosecutor. The snake in the book of Genesis for contemporary Jews and for for earlier audiences was just a snake, right? It wasn't regarded as any other sort of being. So in the Romantic era, the idea that the devil might not be, it's essentially, he's a symbol that can be reappropriated, right? That's how they're thinking of him. As a symbol that can mean something that is not necessarily entirely negative. And when we talk about this idea of the spirit of rebellion, right? I mean, what is it? What phrase does the Lord use in the prologue to describe Mephistopheles? What kind of spirit is he? There's a specific formulation of phrase, though, right? That's used there.
Denial.
Yeah, he's the spirit of denial, right? The spirit that resists, the spirit that says no. The spirit that questions all of this divine apparatus, right? And the Walpurgis Night episode notes about 3 times that Satan himself is sitting at the top of the Brocken. But Mephistopheles never actually takes Faust up there, right? He never actually goes to the top of the mountain. He takes him instead to meet with these various other groups and to experience other pleasures, right? Which are sometimes sort of grotesque parodies of each other. Like when we see Faust and Mephistopheles dancing with the witches. Let's see, where is that? Thank you. Right, bottom of 195. Can I get a Faust, a Mephisto, an old witch, and a pretty witch? All right, Faust. Mephistopheles. Pretty witch. Old witch. Anybody? All right, go for it. Okay, so we're on page 195. And start with Faust, line 3981. Look, one old witch, one young one.
3981?
Yep.
Look, one old witch, one young one. There they sit. They've waltzed around a lot already, I will bet.
Tonight's no night for resting. Page 195. You're going to be around line 3983 or so.
Oh, okay. Tonight's no night for resting, but for fun, let's join the dance, and new one's just begun.
A lovely dream I dreamt one day. I saw a green-leaved apple tree, 2 apples swayed upon his stem, so tempting I climbed up for them.
Ever since the days of Eden, apples have been man's desire. How overjoyed I am to think so. Apples grow too in my garden.
A naughty dream I dreamt one day. I saw a tree split up the middle, the huge cleft phenomenal, and yet it pleased me every way.
Welcome, welcome to you, sire, cloven-footed cavalier. Stand to with a proper stopper, unless you fear to come a cropper.
All right, thank you very much, all of you. Very well done. So, okay. All right, so we have here parallels of the seduction scene in the garden, right? Where Faust is walking around with Gretchen arm in arm, and they're sort of coyly flirting with each other, right? It's sort of the allusions here to garden and apples. On the one hand, yeah, it's temptation and original sin, right? But it's also not really addressing the thing desired directly. Now, when Mephistopheles is talking to the older neighbor Martha, right? His insinuations are much, much more direct. It's like, oh, you're a naughty one, aren't you? Right? And that's the same sort of thing going on here, right? The cloven tree that pleased him in every way, symbolism, is much more obvious and crude and vulgar than the apple and garden symbolism, right? Now, then we have the entrance here. I can't just let this slide because it's just such a great word. The entrance of the Proctophantasmist. Proctophantasmist means man with haunted buttocks. And Goethe is using this figure to mock one of his contemporaries, a guy by the name of Friedrich Nicolai. And Nicolai was an extreme traditionalist. He was a very conservative literary critic who disapproved of radical experiment in art and literature. In particular, he disapproved of any sort of departure from high seriousness. And so we have this man with the haunted buttocks who wants nothing to do with any of these phantoms and phantasms running around, right? Now, the word itself comes from a story that Nicolai straight-facedly tells in his own memoirs, in which he was once haunted by spirits and phantoms, but he got rid of them by applying leeches to his buttocks.
That's something totally different parties.
Yes, it is.
He really did that? Or no, it was his story.
This was the story Nicolai told. Right?
Oh, okay.
Like not actually having been there at the presentation of leeches, I can't say for sure whether this is something he actually did. But the point that Nicolai was trying to make was that spirits and phantasms, right, elements of fantasy, elements of imagination, are essentially the results of medical disorder. Right? You can cure them by using the techniques of medicine at the time, right? And at the end of the 18th, beginning of the 19th century, people still often believed that physical illnesses were caused by imbalances of fluids in your body. So if you just sucked out some of that bad blood using leeches, you'd feel better. Usually you just ended up losing a lot of blood and dying. But this is also not entirely unlike the practices the trial and error medical practices of Faust's father, the good old medical doctor, right? Who went around trying to cure plague, but in doing so, poisoned more people than he cured. So when Faust is contemplating suicide, I promise this is relevant. When Faust is contemplating suicide, what is the object he's holding in his hand that he stares at?
The skull.
There's a skull. And then what does he pull out to drink the poison? Right, he's not going to use the skull to kill himself. That would be remarkably inefficient. We look on page 113. Let's see.
I think 465, the vial.
465, right? Vial, I salute you. Exceptional rare thing, and reverently bring you down from the shelf, honoring you in you man's craft and cunning. Quintessence of easeful sleeping potions, pure distillation of subtle poisons. Do your master the kindness that lies in your power. One look at you, and my agony lessens. One touch, and my feverish straining goes calmer. And my tight-stretched spirit, bit by bit slackens. The spirit's flood tide runs more and more out. My way is clear into death's immense sea. The bright waters glitter before my feet. A new day is dawning, new shores calling to me. A fiery chariot bird-winged swoops down on me. I am ready to follow new paths and higher, aloft into new spheres of purest activity. An existence so exalted, so godlike a rapture. Does the worm of a minute ago deserve it? No matter. Never falter. Turn your back bravely on the sunlight, sweet sunlight of our earth forever. Tear wide open those dark gates boldly, which the whole world skulks past with averted heads. The time has come to disprove by deeds, because the gods are great, man's a derision. To cringe back no more from that black pit, whose unspeakable tortures are your own invention. To struggle toward that narrow gate, around which all hell flames in constant eruption. To do it calmly, without regret, even at the risk of utter extinction. And now let me lift this long-forgotten crystal wine cup out of its chest. You used to shine bright at the family feast, making the solemn guests' faces lighten when you went round with each lively toast. The figures artfully cut in the crystal, which it was the duty of all at the table, in turn to make up rhymes about. Then drain the cup at a single draught, how they recall the nights of my youth. But now there's no passing you on to my neighbor, or thinking up rhymes to parade my quick wit. Here is a juice that is quick too, to intoxicate, a brownish liquid filling the beaker, chosen by me mixed together, my last drink, which now I lift up in festal greeting to the bright new day I see dawning. So, the vial of poison, right, he pours into what? Crystal wine cup. And what does this crystal wine cup mean for him?
It's supposed to be his lost youth.
Lost youth, yeah. And I mean, where did he get the cup?
Family.
Yeah, it's an inheritance, right? Part of his inheritance is this crystal wine cup from his father, the doctor. When he meets with the peasants outside the city walls, what do they offer him? In gratitude for everything he and his father did for them. What do they try to give him? Page 119. Professor, welcome. Oh, how kind to join us common folk today. Though such a fine man, learned mind, not to scorn our holiday. So please accept our best cup, sir, brimful with the freshest beer. We hope that it will quench your thirst, but more than that, we pray and hope your sum of days may be increased by as many drops as fill the cup. So what are they offering him?
Alcohol.
Alcohol, and their best cup, right? To drink a celebratory toast for. Pardon me. So the peasant's best cup then gets him thinking again about his family inheritance, right? And the guilt that he inherits from his father's practices. Bless you. And this is not the last time we see references to drinking and medicine either, right? How is it that Gretchen's mother dies? Yep. Poisoned cup, right? So these medical solutions to various problems, right, are regarded as poisonous and dangerous, right? Even what's supposed to just be a simple sleeping draught so that Faust can get a little bit of time alone with his sweetheart. Administered a little bit too eagerly is a poison, which harkens back to the father's medical practice of, basically mixing together chemicals, magic, and hope.
That was interesting too, though. He's just like, let's drug your mom. He's just kind of like, okay.
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing that, like, a lot of early readings of Faust take Gretchen as this kind of model of angelic innocence, right? To what extent is she innocent?
Pretty pure and gullible.
Pardon?
Pretty pure and gullible. Like, really innocent, to be honest.
She doesn't, like,
But
Mm-hmm. Oh, go ahead.
like, I don't think she's, like, 100%, like, completely innocent. I mean, she's innocent in terms of life experience and stuff like that.
Much like Faust was
Yeah.
before he left his study, right?
But she does, like, when she gets the jewel gifts from Mephistopheles, she does, like, experience, like, greed because,
Sure.
like, her mom wants to give those off to the church, but they're so pretty.
Uh-huh. And the priest, we note, is eager to accept them, right?
Of course.
Oh, those are too nice for you. Better give those to me. Yeah. Now, part of what's going on in the Faust-Gretchen romance is a common late 18th century literary trope. Goethe began his career working in a movement that is known in German as Sturm und Drang. Which we would translate as storm and stress. And it's a movement that predates Romanticism proper slightly, but has a lot of very similar concerns, right? Characters being pulled and pushed around by powerful emotional states, hence storm and stress. But one feature of storm and stress plays and novels is a kind of cross-class romance. Usually between an aristocratic man and an upper middle class, right, a bourgeois girl, younger and less experienced than himself.
That sounds kind of gross.
And, well, they tend to end in a gross sort of way as well, right? Usually with the aristocratic man having had his pleasure, abandoning the now pregnant bourgeois girl, right? Essentially, once she's no longer suitable for fun anymore, he moves on. Usually with disastrous consequences for her.
They mentioned that in the story too, that one man who leaves his wife.
Yeah, oh, she's not his wife.
Or girlfriend, yeah.
Yeah,
His
yeah.
baby mom.
He gets her in trouble and then disappears, right? Much as Faust actually kind of does to Gretchen. The Walpurgis night episode, you'll notice, right, occurs right between Faust killing Gretchen's brother and running away and Gretchen's imprisonment. Right, so while he's off having fun on the Brocken with all of these witches, right, Gretchen is poisoning her mother, killing her baby, and being hauled off to jail
I thought she was.
because she's been abandoned.
I thought she was there on the mountain with him.
No, she's not on the mountain with him. He sees that vision
Okay.
of what's about to happen to her, which Mephistopheles tries to tell him, oh, just, Medusa, don't look at her, right? She'll turn you to stone. Look away. Because Mephistopheles wants to keep Faust focused on the pleasures of the here and now, right? And Gretchen, oh, well, that's a pleasure that's gone. It's a pleasure that's past. Let's keep going. Let's move on. Let's experience more new and different things. The hell with her. Right? You know, when Faust is standing alone in the cave lamenting what has happened to his Gretchen, right? Mephistopheles shrugs and says, she's not the first. Right? That this is an old story. And indeed, this is an old story. Now, what the storm and stress writers were usually trying to point out to a bourgeois audience was the degeneracy of the upper classes. That you couldn't trust these old feudal aristocrats with your daughters or with anything else. But in the Faust story, or at least the Faust story as Goethe presents it, the narrative doesn't work quite the same way. In part, because Gretchen is not, I think as you were noting, Ashley, 100% victim. She is to some extent complicit in her own exploitation. Right? She enjoys the jewels. She continually finds reasons to quiet the qualms that she has about Faust and about his unsavory companion. She willingly drugs her mother so that she can meet with Faust. And Faust's behavior, especially before he's actually talked to her, I mean, we would really consider this the behavior of a creeper, right? Hanging out in her house, like looking at her clothes, imagining where she would sit, and it's freaking creepy. Yeah, not cool. But yeah, there's something not quite the usual narrative going on here. This is not simply the exploitation of a middle-class girl by an upper-class man. So what is being pointed out in the what's often called the Gretchen tragedy? What is it that has shaped Gretchen's morality? Let's look at the scene by the well. Page 181. Gretchen and Lieschen carrying pitchers. Can I get a Gretchen and a Lieschen? All right, Brittany, you be Gretchen. And Lieschen. Page 181. Can I get a Lieschen? All right, Sarah, go for it. All right, so Lieschen, begin.
You've heard about our barber, haven't you? Or have you? I misread that.
No, not a word. I hardly see a soul.
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
No word, I hardly see a soul.
Sybil told me, yes, the whole thing's true. She's gone and done it now, little fool. You see what comes of being so stuck up.
What comes?
Oh, it smells bad, I tell you. Phew. When she eats now, she's feeding too.
Oh dear.
Serves her right, if you ask me. How she kept after him without a let up, gadding about the pair, gallivanting off to the village for music, dancing. She had to be first, always, everywhere, with while he, with wine and sweet cakes, courted her. She thought her beauty echoed famously, accepted his gifts shamelessly. They kissed and fondled by the hour till it was goodbye to her little flower.
The poor thing.
Poor thing, you say. While we two sat home spinning the whole day, and our mothers wouldn't let us out at night, she was where? Out hugging her sweetheart on a bench or up a dark alley, and never found an hour pass too slowly. But now she's got to pay for it, shiver in church in her sinner shift.
He'll marry her. How can he not?
He won't. He can't. That one's too smart. He'll find a girlfriend elsewhere in other tribes. In fact, he's gone.
But that's not nice.
And if he does, she'll rue the day. The boys will snatch her bridal wreath away, and we'll throw dirty straw down in her doorway.
Okay, we can stop there for now. Thank you both very much. Well done. Okay, so the Barbara story is that traditional storm and stress narrative, right? Aristocratic man sweeps in, woos her with gifts, takes her out for a good time, gets her pregnant, then it's goodbye to her little flower, and he's off, right? Now, how does Gretchen... Go ahead.
Was this like a real thing that people, like aristocrats did back then?
I mean, it's something that people still do, frankly, right? I mean, it's still not unheard of for, a man to seduce a girl, get her pregnant, and run away, right? But this is a particular literary trope. Like, I'm more concerned about this as a kind of literary trope that is dealing with particular issues of class consciousness in late 18th, early 19th century Europe. So yeah, I mean, it did happen and continues to happen. But it always followed a particular literary pattern, literary formula in works of this type.
Kind of like the Beauty in the Garden thing. Is this kind of similar, except it doesn't end well?
No, this doesn't end well for anyone. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. Is there any significance to the fact that the narrative lists Gretchen as Gretchen in some parts and Margaret in some parts? There is.
And we actually we mentioned this, I think, right before class started. Gretchen is the diminutive nickname form of Margaret. So Margaret would be sort of more like the adult name, and Gretchen would be more sort of like the affectionate, like childy nickname. So calling her Gretchen rather than Margaret is also kind of highlighting her youth and her inexperience. Now, when Lieschen talks about what they're going to do to Barbara, right? How sympathetic is Lieschen to Barbara's plight? How sympathetic is one woman in this play to another woman who's got in trouble?
Not really.
Yeah, anyone who violates the community standard is to be shunned, right? Which Gretchen, in her innocence, still doesn't quite understand yet, right? It's like, well, no, of course he'll marry her. So, well, okay, well, what can she do then? Wait, you're going to do what to her? Right, so the price for violating conventional morality is public shaming, right? We see this discourse as well in Valentine the Soldier, her brother's song, right? Why is Valentine upset about what's happened to his sister? Is he upset for Gretchen's sake?
It seems like he's more worried about her honor and like her pride being hurt and stuff like that, being shamed instead of her like actually doing it.
Yeah, it's not really about her. It's about how it affects his own reputation and his family's reputation. If we look on page 183, right? Whenever about the boys would fill the tavern with the noise of their loud bragging, swearing Mattie, handsome Kate, or blushing Mary, the finest girl in all the country, confirming what they said by drinking many a bumper, I'd say nothing, my elbows on the table propped, till all their boasting at last stopped. And then I'd stroke my beard and smiling, say there was no point to quarreling about taste. But tell me where there was one who could compare, a virgin who could hold a candle to my beloved sister Gretel. Clank, clank, you heard the tankers rattle. All around and voices shout, he's right, he is, she gets our vote. Among her sex she has no equal, which stopped those others cold. But now I could tear my hair out all. Run right up the side of the wall. All the drunks are free to crow over me, to needle, sneer. And I'm condemned to sitting there like a man with debts unpaid who sweats in fear lest something's said. So he's not mad because of what's happened to her. He's mad because it allows people to make fun of him. Your sister got pregnant. And this is what leads to that fatal confrontation with Faust, right? You're the rat who shamed my family. It's about his own pride and it's about the family honor, not so much about her. So we're about at a time that there's just sort of one last strand here that we need to resolve about what's going on with the Gretchen tragedy. She's killed her mother and her baby. She has indirectly caused the death of her brother. Why is it that at the end of the play, the church bell rings and we hear the voice that says she is saved? I'm just going to leave you with this question, right? Because again, we are at a time. Why is it, what does it suggest about Goethe's concept of the divine that even someone who has committed these particular crimes, at the end of the play, is saved and not dragged off by Mephistopheles? All right, so we're going to have more fun with evil next time. We're going to be reading Charles Baudelaire's poetry. I have some reading questions for you. And once you've got them, you are free to go. Have a good weekend. See you on Tuesday.